Today's mini lecture covers Chapter 9 content, and we're going to look at Piaget's second stage of cognitive development called preoperational thought, and we'll also look at some important milestones in cognitive development in the preschool years, which is ages 2 to 6. So, according to Piaget, preschooler thinking is pre-logical. Preschoolers are not able to perform many logical operations, and they are limited by irreversible, centered, static thinking, and they tend to just focus on appearances. So let's look at each one of these aspects of preoperational thought in more detail. So the first aspect is called centration, and this is the tendency of preschoolers to limit or center their thinking on one aspect only of a problem or of a question. So a preschooler might state that daddy can't be a father because they're centrating or they're focusing only on their own relationship with their dad. And to think about anything beyond that is outside of their capability at this stage. Second aspect of preoperational thought is a type of centration, and this is called egocentration or egocentrism. And this is where a child views the world exclusively and only from their own perspective. Here's an example. When I was 4 years old, and it was my mom's birthday, I remember coming up with the best birthday gift for her. I bought her a pet rock. From my perspective, that's the best gift ever. A third hallmark of preoperational thought is a tendency of preschoolers to focus on appearance. It's not uncommon, for example, for preschoolers to think that old people are too old to do sports. Fortunately, however, especially in Colorado, we know that's not the case. The next hallmark of preoperational thought is called static reasoning. And this is a child's tendency to understand the world in terms of an either-or framework, of a stuck framework, and an inability to understand that things change over time. Here's an example. One night, several years ago, my daughter, who was preschool age at the time, she and I sat down to watch The Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown on TV. And she loved this show. And in her mind, this was probably one of the best shows she had ever seen. So the next night, after dinner, she sat down in front of the TV and turned it on, expecting that The Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown would be on TV. But it wasn't. And she was using static reasoning because in her mind, things should not have to change. Fifth hallmark of preoperational thought is that preschoolers tend to be irreversible in their thinking. They cannot apply the logical idea that things can be reversed and restored to their original condition. So here's another example from my family. My son, one day, pulled the head off of his little sister's Barbie doll. And she was very upset. And she was insistent that the doll couldn't be fixed even though I easily popped the head back on the doll. In her mind, this was irreversible and the doll would never be the same again. A sixth and final hallmark of preoperational thought is that preschoolers do not have the ability to understand conservation, because they simply focus on the appearance or focus on the way things look. This is a block in their ability to understand conservation. So we talked about this example earlier in the semester. If I have a ball of clay and I show it to a child, and then I flatten that clay out into a long snake, a preschooler is going to say that that long snake has more clay than the ball of clay, because they're simply focusing on the appearance and that snake looks longer than the ball. So these are the 6 hallmarks of preoperational thought. Next, I'd like to talk about some general milestones of cognitive development. Children develop at this stage the ability to theorize about the world. And this is the idea that children attempt to construct theories and explain everything that they see and hear. It's human nature to make sense of our world. And as humans, we don't like when things are confusing or when we're in a state of cognitive dissonance, so we constantly seek out meaning and explanation for things. Preschoolers form theory of the world, and in doing so, they ask lots of questions. Usually the questions they ask start with the word why. And a common question that preschoolers ask is, why is the sky blue? So these questions are really questions about the underlying purpose of things. And they're not really asking for a scientific explanation of why the sky is blue, for example. However, as adults, we tend to feel compelled to offer a scientific explanation. And we might say something like, the sky is blue because molecules in the air scatter blue light from the sun more than red light from the sun. This sort of question this sort of answer often satisfies the parent, but not the preschool child, when really what the preschool child is asking for is a big picture understanding of why the sky is blue. For example, we might say the sky is blue because it gives us more light so we can see in the day compared to a night sky that is black. As preschoolers develop formal theories and understanding for the world in their attempt to answer basic questions about their lives, their thought processes continue to develop further, and they acquire theory of mind. Theory of mind is a concept that is different, but it builds upon theory. In theory of mind, children realize that other people can, and they often do, have different ideas and different emotions and different beliefs and different motives than they had. For example, had I developed theory of mind when I was 4, I probably would have bought my mom some perfume for her birthday instead of a pet rock. So, theory of mind is the ability to understand another person's perspective. Theory of mind is strengthened by a number of factors in early childhood, including the maturation of the brain's prefrontal cortex. In addition, children who have older siblings develop theory of mind about 1 year earlier than children who don't have older siblings. Why do you think this is so? Have you ever wondered why younger siblings figure out sooner than older siblings that Santa Claus is not real? Well, older siblings tend to pop the imaginary bubble of younger siblings, don't they? Finally, let's take a look at why these preschool years are a prime time for learning language development. The language areas of the brain experience quick maturation and myelination at this stage. This is shown in an explosion in a child's vocabulary and in their understanding of grammar rules. Scientists used to think that early child was the critical or the only period for language development. However, scientists now believe that early childhood is a sensitive or a very important period for learning grammar rules and vocabulary. So at this stage, children are language sponges, and they will talk to anyone or anything, including themselves, and they are not self-conscious about it. The growth of vocabulary occurs through a process called fast mapping. This is where words are learned after only hearing them one time. Because words are laid down in long-term memory after just one exposure, they are often mapped into the brain with an incorrect meaning or an unclear understanding. A final cognitive marker in language development at this stage is called over-regularization. And this is a preschooler's tendency to overuse rules of grammar. The use of over-regularization, while it shows mistakes in grammar comprehension, it's actually a sign of verbal sophistication because it does demonstrate a growing understanding of grammar. And in reality, in the English language, we have a large number of exceptions to our grammar rules. So a common example of over-regularization is if a child would say, "I fed the mouses their cheese," instead of using the correct plural for the word mouse, which is obviously mice. So in conclusion, we can see in countless everyday instances, as well as in the findings of numerous research studies, that preschoolers reveal themselves to be very thoughtful, remarkably insightful, and perceptive thinkers. Their grasp of the causes of everyday events, their ability to lay down long-term memories, and their mastery of language is sometimes astonishing.